Okay, let me begin. So today we are going to see something called web services. So we will try to understand what is a web service and how it works, how web services work, and what are different uses of web service, how web services help us, or in fact how web services help developers in exposing their functions over the internet. What are different uses of web service and what are different components or what are different entities which make or which help us in using these web services and so on. So let us try to understand it clearly, and at the end of this session we will see what are different tools that are available for this web service testing. So before that, let me just tell you one situation. So let us say you wanted to book a flight ticket. So there are many ways in which you can book flight ticket. You can visit a, you can visit an airline's office and book the ticket directly from there. But that is generally, I mean, we don't follow that in today. So what do? We generally book the tickets online. So even to book online, we can visit a particular airline's service provider and book the tickets. But generally, we are more interested in deals. We are more interested in discounts. So we approach some sites where all the details of or from where you can reserve flights for any airlines. So we, I mean, we use the search criteria. We search for the flights on particular date. Then we look for different airlines. So we can compare. It is like you have the information from multiple airline vendors, multiple airline service providers at a single place. But how is this possible? This is possible because of web services. So because of web services, we are able to get the data from multiple sources or multiple vendors, and we are able to display it at a single place. So what exactly is a web service? Web service is nothing but it's a component of web application. So let me just tell you a little more clearly. So web services are nothing but they are application components, or they are components of web applications, and these communicate among themselves using open protocols. And let us try to dig more into web services. So web services are open standard based web applications that interact with other web applications for the purpose of exchanging data. So here consider the central or a booking site which we have opened. Let's say we are trying to book tickets from xyz.com. And yeah, so for this xyz.com, there are many, I mean, in this particular website, we have data from different airline service providers. This is possible because all the service providers are giving away or they are providing their information over the internet. So how do they share their information? Do they directly share their database? They will never share or never provide access to the database. It's not just about airline service provider. No one in software industry or no one in the world is ready to provide access to other people. So they expose some of their data. They expose their some of data using web services. They expose some of the functionality using web services. Let's say uh, there is an airline ABC. It's an airline company, let's say. So this ABC will have its own database, will have its own uh, infrastructure and everything. But it will just expose some of the features, like it will expose some data, like how many tickets are still vacant, how many are occupied, and which seats are vacant, which seats are occupied, like that. So how does this information, or how this information is exposed? This information is exposed in the form of services. What is a service? Service is nothing but whenever someone requests you for a particular thing, you provide them. Like if you visit a bank and you ask for your current statement, then it is a service which bank provides you, and you are requesting for service and bank is servicing you. Similarly, any kind of service. So this information is exposed over the internet in the form of services. But why do they expose this information? In order to make communication possible, in order to make in order to communicate directly with some other applications. So you are making a query in one website, and this website will internally call the web services of other websites or other service providers. So this is what a web service is. So what is a web service now? Web service is nothing but it's a web application component which is very useful in communicating with other applications. So what is the sole purpose of web service? It is to exchange data. So in order to exchange data independent of platforms, let's say one of you is using Mac and the other one is using Windows and I am using Linux. So each and every operating system will have its own protocol, will have its own file systems. Let's say I am using HTTP for my communication and you are using some other protocol. Let's say I'm good at Java and I want to provide some services. Let's say, get back to the same example. Let's say xyz.com is developed completely in .NET, completely using .NET framework. Let's say XYZ is developed using .NET framework. And let us say this ABC Airlines has developed its complete software using Java. But we want both the systems to communicate, because this ABC Airlines is exposing its services. It is exposing some of the information, but it is written in Java, whereas xyz.com is written in .NET. But we want the communication to happen between themselves, among themselves. Maybe there is another airlines which uses some other server like Perl, and there is another airline that uses Python. So there are multiple environments, multiple programming language, multiple platforms, but we want the communication to happen. In such situations, we depend on web services, because web services are platform independent and they make the communication possible among different platforms. So that is the main aim of web service. So what is the main aim? In order to exchange data independent of platforms, independent of technologies. So that is what a web service is, and that's how web services help us. So web services are based on open standards. And how does this platform independence achieved? It is achieved by using open source standards or open standards like XML, SOAP, HTTP. So HTTP is nothing but it's a protocol, hypertext transfer protocol. So what is a protocol? Protocol is nothing but it's a set of guidelines, set of rules. So HTTP protocol is used in the internet. So all of you just type some URL in your web browser and see what happens. Let us type google.com and see what will happen, or any website for that matter. Let me type Yahoo. This is not displaying the protocols. So I typed google.com. So it says HTTPS. So this is called protocol. HTTPS is a secured protocol over HTTP. So protocol makes the communication. It defines some set of guidelines for communication. And HTTP is an open protocol, or it's an open standard, which is used by almost all the web servers. And there is another one called XML. So similar to HTML, XML is also having some XML tags, and the main purpose of XML is to exchange data. It acts like a semi-structured database. It acts like an intermediate, or it helps us to exchange data over internet. That is what an XML is. XML stands for extensible markup language. So the main purpose of XML is to exchange data over internet. And SOAP or SOAP. SOAP is another protocol which is very helpful in data transfer mechanisms. So we will see all of them. We will see SOAP. We will see other components of web services in some time. So that is about the web service. And so web service can be anything which is available over internet or any private network, in fact. So web service uses, as I said, standard XML messaging service system. So the complete web service concept is based on HTTP protocol and XML standards. So XML messaging system is used, and as I said, it is platform independent. It is not tied to one operating system. It is not tied to one programming language. And web services, as I said, they are exposed over internet. So there will be something called as directory, something like a directory, which is like a telephone directory. So whenever you want to search for a particular person's contact number, so we refer to telephone directory. Similarly, there is a directory for web services as well. It will have the list of web services from multiple organizations, and you can directly access those web service and communicate with that organization. So there is a easily discoverable mechanism defined for these web services. So this is on high level what a web service is. Any questions? So it's like web services uses XML in order to code and decode the information. So that is what a XML messaging system means. So in order to exchange the data, it uses SOAP. So in order to transport the data from one application to another application, one system to another system, it uses SOAP or SOAP, whereas the data is in the form of XML. So XML data is transferred over SOAP. So SOAP provides a protocol, or SOAP provides a mechanism. So what are different components of web service? As I said, web services is purely based on HTTP and XML. So you might get confused here. I was talking about SOAP, I was talking about HTTP. HTTP is a communication protocol. It will help us to, it will make the communication possible between two different systems, two different applications. For example, by sitting at your home, whenever you type some URL, you are able to access the data from the web server. So web server is located somewhere and you are sitting at your home. So remotely you are communicating with the web server. So that is possible by HTTP. So whenever you request or whenever you type a URL, you are sending an HTTP request to the web server, and web server will send you the files using HTTP response. So the communication between you and the web server is happening using a protocol called HTTP. So what is HTTP? It's a simple protocol. It's a simple set of guidelines. That's it. It helps us to define how this data has to be transferred, how you have to request and how it will respond. So it defines a mechanism. So uh, so about XML and SOAP, I'm going to talk about them anyway. But XML is nothing but it's called as a semi-structured database. So if you remember the tags that we have written during HTTP, during HTML we have written tags like this. So I wrote H1. This is heading 1, or let us say web services. So I have written some tags, I have stored, I have included some data into HTML page and so on. So why are we using HTML? In order to format the data, or in order to make the data, or in order to show data, in order to create a web page, I am using HTML. Similarly, XML is another language which stands for extensible markup language. So in XML, we have similar kind of tags for each and every opening tag. We have closing tag. Let's say I want to store your data. So in order to, so if you remember databases, so in a database we have different columns. Similarly, in an XML we have different fields. So let's say I want to store details about a particular student. So I can store, sorry, before this I can have his name as well. Sorry, ID or roll number. The course in which he has joined. So in order to store details about a particular student, Let us say he is one of the student, and sorry, this is the roll number. So student 001, John, he has joined in QA course. Let us say I have another student who has joined today, so I can add his name to it. T002. So this is how XML stores data. So whenever I pass this XML file over the internet, I am not just passing an XML file, I am passing the complete data. So if you observe each and every, or in fact, we should have something like this here. So it is similar to what we have in Microsoft Excel. Let us say I am maintaining a Microsoft Excel to maintain the details of each and every student. So when the first student joined, I have given him a roll number 001, John QA. So if you can see, if you can understand, so this particular student by student tag represents this particular row. This row is represented by student tag. Similarly, again I have another student by student tag wherein I can represent second row. So these attributes or roll number, name, course, these are all column names. So this file is easy to transfer over the internet because it doesn't need much memory compared to any other form of data. So if I can pass this file, if I can share this XML file over the internet, I'm not just sharing a file. I'm not just sharing some XML syntax. I'm sharing the data because the data is available within the notepad or within an XML file, so it doesn't consume too much of memory. So that's why it is called semi-structured database. So what does a database do? Database can store the data, whereas this is called semi-structured database because we are storing the data in a normal text file, but we are giving some structure to it. So this is the structure of it. So if I want to add the another row or add the details of another student, so I can just add another student by student tag. Within that I can add different other elements and I can create or I can insert another student details. So that's why this is called semi-structured database, and that is how XML works. So is it clear with XML now? What is XML? How files look like in XML? Okay. So this is what an XML is. So we use this XML and HTTP as a main components of web service, or in fact these are building blocks of web service. Then next comes different elements of web service, or what are different things which are helpful for us in web services. So there are many other platform elements like SOAP, UDDI, WSDI. So the SOAP or Simple Object Access Protocol is nothing but it's a protocol which will define the structure of XML. So it will define how the communication happens between two different applications. So it will tell in the previous example, it will tell how this XYZ communicates with ABC, how the XML file has to be transferred between these two systems, how the communication should happen, what are different services that we have to consume. This XYZ is called as service consumer and this ABC is called as service provider because this is exposing its services and xyz.com is utilizing the services of ABC. So this SOAP makes the communication between the consumer of services and the provider of services possible. So this helps us in communicating between a consumer of service and provider of service. So it helps us to access web services based on the XML files. So whenever we are transferring an XML file from one system to another system, this XML file is first encoded using SOAP protocol and then it is decoded using SOAP protocol. And this encoded SOAP object is transferred over HTTP protocol. That's where HTTP comes into picture. So the first XML has to be converted into SOAP object and the SOAP object will be transferred over HTTP. So HTTP is a transport layer whereas SOAP is a communication layer. So is it clear now?
Bharat, I didn't get you. Because XML, as you said, XYZ.com uses .NET and ABC.com uses Java.
Yes.
Is SOAP coming into picture because it is converting those two different what do you call the Java as a programming language and .NET
Yeah, you have brought a
scripting.
very good point. A very good point here. I got where you are coming from. So I said the communication happens using XML. So this Java server, it will generate an XML and this one will also generate an XML. And yeah, that's why in order to make it platform independent, we are depending on XML. And that's where SOAP is coming into picture. Because uh, Java programs can only understand function calls given in Java. A Java program can understand the communication with another Java program. Similarly, .NET program can only understand uh, communication with another .NET program. But in order to have a common platform, we depend on SOAP because whatever the XML that is generated in Java, it has to be sent to .NET. So that's why we encode it using SOAP protocol. Is it clear? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, you mean to say the Java and the .NET will generate XML kind of files, and then those XML files are being um, taken by SOAP to. I didn't get you actually.
Okay. Okay, let me just tell you more clearly. So yeah, so this is Java. So let us say, actually I didn't want to get into function calls and their syntaxes, but since the time has come, I have to go. So how many tickets are still vacant? So let us say there is a service which will tell you vacant tickets, and there is another one which says occupied seats. And here xyz.com, what is the I mean, xyz.com has to read the number of vacant seats from the ABC. Let me just take a fresh file. So this xyz abc.com is exposing its services like vacant seats and seats already occupied. So what does this vacant seats uh, service do? It will give you the number of vacant seats along with seat numbers. And this particular service will tell you how many seats are already occupied along with their numbers. And then next comes XYZ. So this XYZ, it has to know how many seats are vacant, and this is based on Java. This is based on .NET. So for this xyz.com, to know how many seats are vacant, it cannot directly call a Java program because .NET cannot understand Java and Java cannot understand .NET. So you cannot directly access this vacant seats service because this is exposed. Though this is exposed over internet, the format or the internal workings are different for Java and .NET. Internal details are completely different. The memory, the way in which .NET controls memory is completely different from the way in which Java controls the memory. In fact, what I mean to say is there are completely two different entities. So in order to access service which is exposed by some other platform, I should have a common system which will convert or which will help us with this interoperability. So in order to access a service which is in Java from the .NET, I have to depend on an intermediate protocol called SOAP. So this SOAP will make the communication possible between two independent or two distinguished systems. So it will convert, it is like this, it will convert the Java based services into a common service, or it provides a common service. So is it clear now,
Yes, Bharat.
or still any confusion? So what is that common service? Actually, the common service here, I mean, whenever I said at the first point, I mean, whenever I introduced you to web services, I said the main purpose of web service is to exchange data. So the main objective of us is to exchange data. So this SOAP will provide a service which will help us in exchanging data. There is nothing called common service. There is nothing specifically common service among all the systems. It is nothing like distributed systems like Corba, distributed systems like RPC, nothing like that. But the main objective here is to exchange data. So this data exchange is possible using SOAP and the XML, because XML is a platform independent data structure or platform independent semi-structured database. And this SOAP provides us a mechanism to expose, I mean to access the exposed services. So whenever you access the service, we get an XML file, that's it. So what do I mean by getting an XML file? We get some data, because XML is nothing but it's a set of data. So that is what we get. So that is what I meant. So using SOAP, you get some, or we use SOAP in order to make this communication possible, and also in order to encode these XML files. So that is how XML and SOAP helps us in web services. So there is something, yeah, this is one of the platform element, which is SOAP. And there is another platform element called UDDI, Universal Description, Discovery and Integration. So this ABC company is exposing its web services over internet. But how does this XYZ know that ABC web services are available over the internet? So for that, as I said, we have something like a directory, something like a telephone directory. We have web services directory. So this UDDI is nothing but it's a directory of web services. So this UDDI tells us what are UDDI gives us information about different web services available, and also it will tell us if there are any interfaces provided by the organizations or direct web services. So this UDDI is nothing but it's a directory, that's it, nothing beyond that. So UDDI provides a platform independent framework which will describe the services, and which will also help us to discover services, and we can also make use of those services. So whenever you found some web service in a directory, it means it will tell you the information about that web service, and also it will tell you what kind of business it is involved in, and it will also help us to integrate. So whenever we found a web service, you can integrate it within your application. So that's how UDDI helps us. And the next platform element is WSDL, which stands for Web Services Description Language. So WSDL or Web Service Description Language is a language which is used in web services, which is used to describe and locate web services. So in order to access UDDI, so in order to find a web service using UDDI programmatically, we have to write programs as scripts in WSDL. So WSDL is it's like a programming language for web services. So in order to locate any web service, in order to find any web service, or in order to create a web service of your own. So in order to describe your own web service, we have to depend on WSDL, which is the Web Services Description Language. But when it comes to testing, we need not know WSDL, we need not know UDDI, we need not know SOAP. All we have to test is, so output of this WSDL is something, it looks like a XML file. So we have to check, so this communication happens in the form of request and response because HTTP is involved. So always the HTTP communication happens in the form of request and response. So our main aim is to check the request and the response messages. So we have to verify if the response is proper as per the request or not. So we have requested for vacant seats. So is it returning the vacant seats or not? We are requesting for a statement. So is it returning the statement or not? We are requesting for some information, whether the only specific information is returned or not. So that is what we do as part of testing web services. So these are different platform elements which are involved in web service. So what are the benefits of using web service? Suppose if you consider the ABC again, so I have a function which will return the vacant seats. But till I make it as a web service, or till I expose this function as a function over the internet, it was just a simple function used in within my own organization, within my own company. But now I am exposing it to public. So I am what I call, I am growing. I mean, I am releasing my information over the market. So which will definitely increase the business. Otherwise, the tickets or the industry, e-commerce industry, so most of the e-commerce industry will not exist today. So if you take Amazon, if you take eBay, so they have different vendors with them. So all these vendors expose their web service, and the Amazon or eBay, they will consume the web services. So that's how they are able to display the price. That's how they are able to display information from different vendors. That's how they are able to manage. Even there are many sites which will help us to compare the prices between different companies, prices of a particular product in different websites. So how is this possible? It's possible because of the web services. So half or most of the e-commerce industry today is depending mainly on the web services. So there is a lot of scope for testing in web services. There is a lot of scope for new projects in web services, which means there is a lot of scope for opportunities in web services testing. And yeah, that is one of the benefit. And the next one is connecting different applications, that is interoperability, which we have seen. So interoperability is the term which is used uh, as a synonym for platform independence. Interoperability is nothing but it's a, what is this? So whenever we have two different platforms, whenever we have two different applications, if they are able to communicate among themselves, it is called as interoperable. So we are connecting different applications. That is nothing but an interoperability. And we have some standardized protocols like HTTP, XML. So that is why web service can also be so we are standardizing whatever we have already, so through which all the different stakeholders of communication are communicating. So that is also another benefit. And low cost of communication, because you are just, if you are an organization, from your perspective you are just developing and you are just exposing your method over the internet. So it doesn't need much cost. You are just registering your web service in the UDDI. That's it. And the vendor or the consumer of the web service, they will consume your services from the UDDI. So there is nothing like a business agreement between you. There is nothing like uh, thick paper based agreements between you. It's so it basically reduces the cost of communication. And there is something called SOA. So SOA stands for service oriented architecture. So this SOA is all about distributed computing. So which is nothing but client server or such kind of computing. So whenever we request something, we request a service from the web server, so it responds back. So this is called request response scenario. So whenever I type the URL, the web server will send the files related to that particular URL. So whenever I type google.com, so I will get the response as Google homepage. Google homepage is nothing but the HTML file related to Google homepage. So where is this HTML file residing till now? It was residing in the Google server. So when I request for the file, Google server is responding back by sending the file to me. So this is called as request response scenario. So SOA architecture or service oriented architecture is all about the distributed computing based on request and response scenario. So distributed computing means you have you have all your communication devices distributed over the network. So all in all you have common is a protocol like HTTP. So that is what an SOA is. So SOAP is nothing but it's an implementation of SOA. So SOAP is a kind of SOA. So SOAP is a protocol which will help us in this with this kind of communication, whereas SOA is a standard. So SOAP is nothing but it's an implementation of SOA. Yeah, asynchronous and synchronous. It is. I mean, it's not a rocket science. Actually, asynchronous is suppose you are requesting a service, and if you are requesting a service and waiting for the response, so it is nothing but it happens in a sequence or uh, for this asynchronous, let me tell you one classic example. Actually, it involves cryptography. I don't want to get into cryptography again. Asynchronous is nothing but it's a real time. Actually, so whenever suppose take the example of Google server. So at any particular point of time, can you imagine how many hits are made on a Google server? So let us say all of us, five of us, are trying to access Google homepage at a particular point of time. So whether Google will serve all of you simultaneously? Yes. So if all of us type google.com at same point of time, it will respond back to all of us. It will not ask us to wait. I mean, it will not serve us one after the other. So if let's say if all of us are accessing Google server at a same point of time, if it is stopping all of us and if it is asking us to wait in the queue, so if it is serving one after the other, it is called as synchronous. So the order in which the request has come and it will respond back to the orders in the same manner, then it is called synchronous. But when it can serve the users randomly, it is called as asynchronous operation. So synchronous is all about sequence or it's all about following a particular pattern, whereas asynchronous is like a random response. So it is able to serve all of us simultaneously. it is asynchronous. It, I mean, it need not be first come first serve. There are many other implementations of it, last in first out, or priority basis. So what I mean to say is, if it asks you to if it asks you to wait for some time, so that is kind of synchronous operation. But when you are getting the response immediately, then it is called as asynchronous. So is it clear? So before getting into this slide, let me just tell you whatever we have discussed so far. So we have seen what a web service is. So what is a web service now? Web service is nothing but it's a component of web application which is exposed over internet, and its main purpose is to exchange the data. So how does this exchange is possible? So web services uses XML to code and decode data. So data is maintained within Excel, and the SOAP protocol is used to communicate this data. So what are the benefits of using an web service? You can reuse the components. Like similarly, what you have vacant seats. Suppose similar to xyz.com, maybe there are some 5 to 6 websites which will help us to book websites from multiple airline vendors. So you can make use of this particular single vacant seats web service, and you can and this can be reused on all the websites. Similarly, we have many web services or many web components over the internet, like currency converters, temperature converters. All of them can also be reused over the internet. So all of them can be made as a web service. And so by this web service, we can link the applications. We can link multiple applications, and we can also link their data by using XML. So what are these are some of the benefits of web services, and yeah, we have seen other benefits like low cost of communication, interoperability, and we are making the existing functionality over the internet, which means we are increasing our business potential. So these web services are based on XML, and they are uh, I mean, there is no tight coupling with the technology. So whatever we so the end product or the ultimate objective is to exchange data, and the data exchange is happening in the form of XML, which is platform independent. So this can also be called as loose coupling or loosely coupled data. Web services are loosely coupled because they are not integrated to any particular platform. So that's about the web services. And we talked about SOAP. So what is SOAP? SOAP is nothing but it's a protocol which is based on XML, and this is used for accessing web services. So it's like this. So suppose we use WSDL to locate a web service from UDDI. So we use WSDL programming language to locate a web service from UDDI. But how do we make use of it? Here comes SOAP. So SOAP is nothing but it's a protocol, as I said. So it's a communication protocol. So in order to access the web service from the UDDI, SOAP comes into picture. So that's how SOAP is helpful. So whenever I say web service, it is nothing but an XML file transported over HTTP. That's it. Nothing much than that. Web services is all about XML and HTTP. and WSDL. So we have seen what is WSDL. WSDL is a language which is used to describe and also to locate the web services. And so what is another one we have seen? Yeah, UDDI. So UDDI provides it directory services wherein we can discover services, we can use the services, we can integrate the services into our own applications. So let us try to look at the characteristics of it. So SOA services have self-describing interfaces in platform-independent XML documents. So this is more like talking about the uh, web services or the functions which are exposed over the internet. So self-describing interfaces is nothing but the particular web service or the particular organization is describing about the describing about themselves in the form of web services. So they are offering web services in the form of XML documents. So that's what this point means, but it is little technical terms. So SOS services have self-describing interfaces in platform-independent XML documents. So each and every organization exposes their services in the form of XML documents. And we have seen what is WSDL. So this XSD stands for, so in the third point, you can see SOS services communicate with messages formally defined via XML schema, also called XSD. So what it means, what they are trying to describe here is, so these services or this communication happens in the form of XML, but each and every XML file will have a structure, as I have shown you. Student, let me just show you that file. So this is the XML code which I have shown you. So this is called as XML schema. The way in which you are organizing the XML file is called XML schema or XML design document, or that is what is meant by XSD, XML structure document. So XML schema it all talks about the format in which the XML data is organized. So so whenever the communication happens using SOS services, this communication or the format of XML file is defined in a something called XML schema. So whenever we write XML, it is mandatory for us to specify the schema. So I don't think there is any need for including this point especially here, but it is for your information. So next point says SOA services are maintained in the enterprise by a registry that acts as a directory listing. This is talking about UDDI. So applications can look up services in the registry and invoke the service. Then the next one says each SOA service has a quality of service associated with it. So it is kind of metric. So quality of service is a kind of metric to measure the service levels of SOA. And we are not bothered about QoS as part of testing, and generally this QoA comes into picture when the companies measure their productivity rates or measure their quality rates, but we don't get into all such details. Even developers will not get into such details as far as I know. They're mainly used for reporting uh, by managers. Then WSDL is used to describe the service, UDDI to register and look up the service, and SOAP as a transport layer to send messages between service consumer and the service provider. So the communication between consumer and provider happens using a protocol called SOAP, and by looking up. So let me just tell you a simple scenario. So suppose one of you have an organization, or one of you are owning a company. So you can create your own web service. You can describe your own web service, that is the accurate term. And whenever you create a web service, you will, whenever you describe a web service, you will register it in the UDDI. And whenever so you have registered the service in UDDI, and so you are the service provider now. So you are the service provider, and suppose I want to make a use of your service, or I'm looking over the internet to find a particular service, and I found your service to be what I'm looking for. So I can look up in the UDDI, and I can make use of your services, which is nothing but consuming your service. So how do I consume your service? I look up for your service in the UDDI, and I use WSDL to make use of your service. And within the WSDL, or whenever I am coding WSDL, I have to follow the standards set by the SOAP protocol. That's it. As I said, protocol is a set of standards, so we have to adhere to them. So this transport happens using SOAP or SOAP. So this is about the web services. So what are different tools available for web service in the market? Mainly there are two open source tools which are widely used in the industry. So the tools are SOAP UI. And the other one is JMeter. This is from Apache. So these two are open source tools which are used in the industry for web services testing. So what do we do as part of web services testing, if you remember? So we analyze request and response WSDL files. So I said WSDL is the language which is used for uh, locating and accessing the services. So we make, or we so what do we do is, actually using this SOAP UI tool, we copy the request message in the SOAP UI tool. Actually SOAP UI tool will have two different windows. I don't think I have included the screenshot here. Let me just show you the screenshot of SOAP UI. I have uninstalled it, otherwise I could have shown you the tool itself. Yes. Yes. So this is how SOAP UI looks like. So in the left pane here, these are two different panes. So we have a divider between these two different windows. So in the left side, we copy the request message or request WSDL file, and we click on this button here. It's like, it looks like a play button. So whenever we click on that button, what happens is the server address is mentioned over this address bar. So in the address bar, so whenever we have the server address, this request goes to this particular server, and the response is displayed in the right side. So whatever the server or whatever the server is responding, so that particular response can be observed in the right side pane. So we can analyze whether the request and response are proper or not. That's how we can use this SOAP UI tool. So we can compare two different XML files or two different WSDL files. So WSDL is nothing but it's an essentially an XML file itself. It's nothing more than that. So it is, XML files are very easily readable. They are easy to read because you have different elements, and you have to you have the defined structure as well. So by looking at the XML file, we can easily understand the structure of the XML file. So we will see what is written in the request file and what should be the response. So if the response is exactly what we are expecting, then which means the service is working fine, web service is working fine. Otherwise we have to uh, consider it as a defect. That's it. That's how we test the web services. So is it clear?
Bharat, can you explain the testing point of view of using these tools once again, please?
Yeah, sure. So actually, so what is the purpose of web service? It is to exchange information. So how does this exchange happens? Exchange happens in the form of request and response. So how are we requesting the service? I said web services are described and looked up, or they are coded using language called WSDL. So what is WSDL again? WSDL uses XML to for coding. So whenever we create a request message or whenever we write a response message, so it's all in the form of XML. So at the heart of web service, at the core of web service exists XML. So the request which we are writing in the form of by using WSDL is copied in this particular left window. See, there is a division between two windows. This left one is for request, and the right one is to paste the response. So in the request, we will include what we call as request message or the request WSDL. And how are we requesting the service? In order to request a service, as I said, web services are spread over the internet. So we should know the URL of that particular web service. So that particular URL or the address is pasted in the address bar here. So just above these two panes, there is an address bar here. So in this address bar, we will type the address of that particular server. And whenever we click on something, a button which looks like play button, so it will send this request to this particular server. So whenever we send a request to the server will respond back. So the response from the server is captured and it is pasted by the tool itself. So the tool itself will place the response in this particular right pane. So we have the request at the left hand side, we have the response at the right hand side. So we know, as a tester, we should know what is we are requesting for. And definitely the response will also be mentioned within the documents. So we have to compare this request and response. Suppose in the request I am requesting for student details. In the response, if I get employee details, it is not a proper response. So I have to map the response in the right hand side with the response that I am expecting. So where do you have the expected response? Maybe you will get some documentation before the project started. So from the expected response in the documents, we have to verify it in the response from the SOAP UI tool. And also we can compare the request and response from the left and right pane. So whether the response is proper as per our request or not. So web service testing is all about testing the request and response in the form of XML sheets or XML files. So that is how we test using SOAP UI tool. Is it clear now? Okay.
Yes, Bharat.
So this is one of the tool which is very widely used for web services testing, which is SOAP UI. And there is another tool called Apache JMeter. So these two are very widely used in when it comes to web services testing. But SOAP UI has the highest market share. Generally, we can also do this comparison manually, but when it is automation, we need to test this, or when we want to automate this web service testing, we depend on SOAP UI. So any more questions? So if you don't have any questions, so I'll wind it up for today. So that's it for today. Thanks a lot everyone for joining this session. Have a nice weekend. Yeah, bye.